shares, okay, that needs to get processed. If you imagine 14 billion outstanding shares for a small client like Santander, with a small bank like Santander, and you have 6,000 corporate issuers, you can imagine the number of volume that in transactions per second, the speed is absolutely not there, okay. So that's why when you do something, you need to have design considerations as to what you're going to keep on the. It's a very important design consideration to be kind of an application, okay. So you would essentially keep the fingerprint of the chain, okay. One very important point, it's extremely secure. It's not, okay. Hashing is not really. There are a couple of times has to run on somebody else's machine. So you can imagine the kind of trust that network needs to allow, okay. Smart contracts use a programming language like Solidity versus Java, because Java might allow you the flexibility with minimal construct, okay. These are very important considerations. Let's take digital identity, okay. Or why is it important? For example, let's say you're building an application and the way you hash is a combination of your public and private key, looking for organization A and go to organization B. So then what happens to the data? If you've taken your private key away, does the organization still have access to the data? Very important topic kind of networks. Finally, I really want to kind of summarize. In the sense, the evolution is moving from Bitcoin to blockchain to distributed on-chain, off-chain hashing. I think the panel will talk a little more about it. Secured smart chain. You may be on one. It's one of the key topics as this technology kind of. To summarize, I think this whatever I talked about, if you keep that as part of your design considerations, that'll be excellent. And the business potential, look at the early adopters and see what, To conclude, I believe that I really have to say. The future. So thank you very much, and I request my fellow panelists to join me on the panel. Can we call? Okay, good.
Very valuable. Thank you so much, Mr. Luck. I request you to wear the moderator's hat, and I would request on stage Shri K.R. Sanjeev, CTO, Wipro. She's visiting lecturer, and Manyan, Managing Director, Goldman Sachs. Over to the panel.
Panel and price kind of a situation. To be in an enterprise was really, so you really have, I would, a lot of great takeaways. So very quickly, just in block, okay, and
group. This is based out of Bangalore. This landscape, we've been looking at blockchain from about 3 years now, and we've been building applications in that space. Blockchain is quite interesting because if there is one entity threatened by evolution of such a technology, it's banks. Instead of fearing it, we are looking at embracing this technology, and we're looking at building use cases around it.
For Wipro, we also started our journey practice with a set of strategic and financial goals, with concept, technology evaluation, and the whole host of services required to experiment and standing up a crowd can be leveraged by anybody, not just for us. Our interest in blockchain, our potential is huge, and obviously we are keen on.
I've been at Goldman Sachs for 4 days as an ISB, which is Indian School of Business, as an interim director of a digital identity research project. My interest in blockchain is not specific to blockchain, but more technology innovation.
Good afternoon. I come from academia, Kolkata, specifically. So my interest in this topic of the panel, a technology for trust, is more on the trust part. If you start trusting anybody, I want that. So it's more the mistrust aspect of a network, the Bitcoin, or the other network that interests me. So I'll probably talk a little bit about identity and trust issues in blockchain. Thank you.
Thank you. Blockchain and say, it is about trust and that kind of good stuff, right? So I think Padma has a very interesting perspective as can you kind of quantify this word trust, right? And you've done a lot of work and research on that.
Thanks for technology comes and people say trust and blockchain solves identity or trust thing. We need a system, right? And that as an example, yes, it will create a lot of value, but actually go a bit more deeper into it. Having an identity. So we'll take Aadhaar, which is a digital in India, and we will take a very specific kind of sector, financial inclusion. Previously, a typical transaction between two banks would be anywhere between 100 and 150 rupees. This is excluding the. Would anybody be able to guess what would be the typical transaction on an Aadhaar-enabled payment infrastructure where the identity is kind of it's anywhere between 5 and 15 rupees, depending on the frequency of transaction. So to me, this is a value that has been quantifiable. Right? So when trust went of 10, and what does the second order effect of having such a value creation in less than 20? The poverty line definition, which I think, let's assume it's 20,000 rupees per year is a below poverty line definition. So creating a bank account, so creating about 300 million bank accounts, digitally trustworthy system is come down significantly. Otherwise, this tried it, and India has tried it many times, but financial inclusion has not happened. So the first order impact is being 300 million people. Accounts have 60% of the deposit of the banking system. Just to put that in perspective, that's a very, very small of deposits, 1% of customers that they're going to go behind. And genuinely, economically, of being able to, and that quantifying the value of a technology innovation, which is some amount of similar puzzle, amount of value creation that will come from digitalizing an asset and being able to transact. I mean, is it an order of, this is a, and part of the work we did at ISB is around this, and that's why I wanted to share this example as a valuation metric.
Attach that value for extremely, extremely valuable. But this is something, from us or from me to don't have money from one wallet to the other that was implemented. But if you attach a physical asset and you have to transfer in an application doesn't agree, then what are the legal party? That's something for you to kind of ponder upon. So, but that's a very good, value and value creation. How are people making money different from the conventional business models? What are the enterprises doing?
If you look at 60 to 65% of our customers who are doing something or the other on blockchain, some use back, pretty much. This is a great progression. I mean, I don't think any technology, including artificial intelligence, have seen this kind of a rate of that the prices are. Most of the traction which people have, find out something they want to clear, which a strategy worked out and some early towards from a very early days being done across the enterprise. The work or the pilots are around what you would call as cost efficiencies, which are focused on cost efficiency. Again, financial, manufacturing, supply chain. You heard all those terms. Telecom is a big the blockchain. There are today which have a huge at recon. We have some of our customers spend billions of dollars on the recon. Go are optimizing that. We say that 40% of the cost you can take out of that. But a blockchain is something that will go upstream and actually eliminate that. It's pilots that, over the next couple of years with so much security issues, off-chain, on-chain, architectural issues, they will get addressed. And the inflection point is that over a kind of ROI. Where we stand, as of today, like I said, it's pilots and proof of concepts, but the early indicator, the big million.
I read some report where even in the capital markets industry, which we are like $30 billion or something like that. I mean, you have, actually really, what do you think of, what he said, and then what?
So when we initially built, at that point, it was very similar. We were just to tinker around in the lab. We were just trying to understand what we could do with this technology. We realizing if you just adopted a business case, the potential of blockchain to its fullest, adopt blockchain. And so we did the other way down. We went to the businesses, once we started understanding it, in very few cases where we went that a little more in detail, and then started simulating that in the lab to see how this would look like. See, do you think this makes sense? And then make it to the next level. But even then, we were confined to do it happening in the real life. Technology trends you may have seen opens up collaboration with our edge we have compared to a customer. So we ended up competing, who are in fact one of the biggest commodity traders. That the first and second would actually use cases. The problem is a lot more complex than simple problems, like standard reference libraries won't exist because blockchain doesn't play. Where do you get the reference? What should be the language? How do we name the ports? A simple problem, a port was named Vladivostok. One bank wanted to name it with historical reasons because it's a certain way, but in English you call it in a different way. Now, these are the problems we did. Applications were not built, you built one application to serve one specific purpose, and that's how you went about doing it. Not just the blockchain, but adopt something like a blockchain. Now, this was a huge journey we went through in the first did. Despite all, built something with what it was, we went to the next step forward with it, and we saw about 30. Now we're talking about a 70. In that one step further, we are now working with across the board actors, some of private enterprises, the letter of credit process, and the whole thing is simple. And now we've understood how to build an application, adopting this than how it seems.
Getting a set of points, I think collaboration, right? It's a key. Rating and your and what kind of ontology they have, common ontology across. The ontology is again in many ways an identity question, right? And I think in my opinion, probably listening, we probably think where is this all headed? How do we solve this problem?
Say a room like this where nobody knows, nobody trust between. As soon as your blockchain was meant to do back to the
question on the identity. Today, for example, he spoke about Aadhaar. Do you think there is room for institution identity, just like Aadhaar, where you?
You mean institution identities where the parties in that institute are just merely?
Let's say Broadridge. Broadridge does have an identity, or let's say Goldman Sachs. So any transaction, when you're fingerprinting it, there's an institutional identity along with your personal identity, so to speak.
So there are several types of the identity. The only time the identity comes into play in a blockchain network as of now is the time you sign off something as a signature. And there are several types of signature mechanisms available from crypto. You can do a group identity, like a group signature or ring signature. You can do a hierarchical level of identity with a proxy signature. You can do a generic signature in a Bitcoin. So DIP can define a different form of signature as a different form of identity. It should be doable.
Thank you. So actually we are running out of time. So we will take some questions from open for questions now.
I have a question to Saurav. Everybody says that blockchain fundamentally is a cryptology technology. Underneath the technology is crypto sciences and all that. So in your R.C. Bose Institute of Cryptology, are you on some of the fundamentals on the cryptology, and can we come with some new standards of blockchain technology using your research which is happening in your institute?
Right. So it's not just me. There is a group that's working on blockchain technologies at R.C. Bose Center. So cryptology in a blockchain, that's one big area. The second area is where there is an open platform like a peer-to-peer network. How do you design a consensus and, more importantly, an incentive mechanism to keep the people honest in that network? So that's another big area where cryptography and, in some sense, economic game theory comes into play. The third area is more from a legal framework or regulatory framework. Can you satisfy both sides of the coin, privacy as well as regulation and liability? These seems to be head-on collisions. You can have privacy with regulation if you can have something more sort of an on-demand privacy. So you are private till the point you make a wrong move. So can you have a regulated